Well, hello everybody. Thanks for joining Steve and I again. We haven't talked in a while. It's Steve has been in Bali for a few months, working on a house. Right? You're doing some construction work there, and
Yes,
now he's back in Australia for a couple of months. And this was a great chance for us to pick up where we left off last time. We have been talking about safety and trust as being a foundation in interpersonal, especially intimate relationships. And one of the things that we both are interested in is the topic of when you're in a relationship, whether it's intimate or it's just with a friend, there's a triggering that happens. And if we're not aware of our triggers, if we're not aware of those things that just set us off and we go into a reaction mode, it can have devastating consequences in a relationship. And these are things that if we want to develop spiritual maturity, it's at some point we need to learn how to navigate that. And I really want to talk about this topic with Steve today. He has a lot of good insights about safety and trust. And a lot of friends that I have shared the podcast that we have done together have all been very enthusiastic about Steve's insights and his work with Compassion Keys. So let's just start off from there, Steve. If we could talk about, just those situations where you're getting along with somebody, a partner or a wife or husband, and they say something or they give you this certain look and it just sets you off, and how can we learn how to step around that reactivity so that we can keep safety and trust as being the most important thing that we establish?
absolutely. Yeah, it's great to be back here, recording another conversation as well with you, Leo. So thanks for having me back and for the invite and for the kind words as well. I love just, sharing whatever insights have been gathered for the betterment of humankind and to ease the way, I guess. So with understanding. So yeah, thank you. And I love sharing on this particular topic because it's something that I have really struggled with personally. And what I found in my most recent relationship is that I did have a lot of reactivity, especially when something felt like it was um, unfair, or it wasn't my intent to cause upset or harm. And I find this is kind of common with people as well that I speak to and that I see around the place that that wasn't my intent. I didn't mean to, is a way to try to deflect and avoid responsibility for how behavior has impacted another person. The most effective things that we've discussed previously is the ability to sit with the charge of feeling triggered or big emotions coming up, because the initial desire and from early in life can be maybe that people weren't shown emotional mature coping techniques growing up. And so there is volatility modeled around big feelings and emotions at home, and that becomes the way of operating. And so the I think a really big part actually of the spiritual evolution that's going on this planet, and an essential gateway for us to get through collectively, is emotional maturity and emotional mastery, because it's it's the opposite that actually hinders the ability to uh, make room in ourselves for God and connection with our larger selves, because that is so busy exciting the ego, exciting the personality, which is tending then to take up all of that space inside, because fear and fight or flight or freeze or fawn might be activated, and the ego comes in and says, all right, I've got this. I know what to do. I'm going to pull out XYZ response and manipulation and upset, and I'm going to try and control the situation like I've seen it done before. Or I'm all typically with the intent to try to generate safety, whether it be playing the victim or attacking or um, deflecting blame or yeah, whatever it might be. I think ultimately it's trying to generate safety. It's trying to remove the threat of an emotional kind of whiplash or burden that we perceive coming our way, and that we won't have the self-backing to be able to hold ourselves in how big that feeling is that we might perceive the other person's trying to put on us. And it could be um, it could be getting told off as a child. It could be a guilt trip. It could be anything like this. Um, it may have felt like a lot. It may have felt like overwhelming in childhood. And so I think this illuminates like this whole triggered um, response and situation is um, if someone is affected by our behavior in a way that we didn't see coming, because there can be the tendency to try to behave in a way that keeps our environment the most safe based on what we've worked out so far and our patterns and our coping mechanisms. And when a situation comes up from left field that we didn't expect and it causes a big upset on somebody else, it can take us straight back to a time when showing up just as we are in our innocence got us reprimanded, and it seemed to us upset somebody else. And so in adulthood, I find that the most effective disruptor to this pattern is that this practice of taking 100%, not 99 when when it's convenient, but 100% responsibility for ourselves and our behavior and the way that we respond and are with our emotions. And so when I cause an upset, sorry, if there's an upset that comes up with my partner, and the old model might have been for me to look for ways where it's my fault, but she might just be having a hard time or, some other stuff coming up. It is to practice non-reactivity, especially as a man. And I might have said it in previous podcasts, but my partner and I early on established that we both take 100% responsibility for how we are showing up emotionally, because when it feels like we're hopeless to our emotional responses and triggers, then that's going to make it difficult to feel trust and safety in the connection. And so I think that comes back to this piece around I am responsible for how I behave. And when somebody comes to me with elevated emotions that have triggered me or shocked me, that's not an excuse to abdicate from that responsibility and start exchanging any kind of reactivity and coping to try to lessen this feeling of, oh, well, you're trying to make me feel this way and you're trying to load me up with this emotion and I don't want to, so I'm going to use whatever I can to avoid being stuck with that big feeling. And that goes back to when you know you've got your own back with big feelings and you can sit with the charge in a non-reactive or judging way, as we've said before, eventually it has a way of dissipating that charge and it has a way of passing through. And what's left is, especially if this is a turnaround that someone's been working on in themselves, is a really nice feeling of, wow, like big feelings are not that bad and as anxiety inducing as they used to feel. Like, wow, look at that, it is true. And there's stuff out there now that if you can do this in a neutral and calm way, that the maximum time that a big charge will stick around for is like 90 seconds. And that might vary, but it just goes to show, like the contrast of feeling with these arguments when they feel unprovoked, as you and I both know in a relationship. Sometimes it can like just make you feel so heavy for like a day or something, because you're just so like, that wasn't fair, that was unsolicited, like that wasn't my fault, that wasn't. And it can be, yeah, it can be very difficult. But also the other side of this is that when we hold ourselves with these big feelings and don't like engage with them and embellish them and justify them and things like that, we're also able as men to be that for our partner. And the really interesting thing there is when there is non-reactivity and um, more spaciousness as a result of knowing that we've got our own back, then that spaciousness makes available choice. And so the ability to actually choose a response then becomes available rather than this triggered response. And then we're kind of railroaded into um, patterned ways of trying to protect ourselves and generate safety again, which we behave that way whether we like it or not, because it often will trigger something subconsciously. So bringing this into the conscious, I've got my own back. Yes, this sucks. The way that it's feeling like it's my fault when it doesn't feel like it is. But then with that space, I'm like, okay, that person is pretty upset about this, and there might have been something pretty horrible that's happened repeatedly in the past that this situation reminds them of. And compassion's a choice. Yeah, I'm really sorry that this that that you know that I'm coming across that way. And or yeah, are you okay? Is there some support I can give you, which is contrary to you're my enemy for getting this upset at me. And what it does is it that space allows for um, neutrality, support, and when there isn't that engagement and then that tussle for rightness, when rightness doesn't matter anymore, then that's the foundations of trust and safety. And that's often when the other person will be able to move through the emotion fairly unencumbered. They just needed to like let it out, and they're able to come back to an emotional regulation themselves. And I found oftentimes that with this approach, and it's not an expectation, but the other person might come back and later on and say like, like, oh, thanks for not having a go at me, or thanks for letting me get that out, or something like that. And you're like, yeah, that's cool. Like 80% of the time, we're taking responsibility for how we're showing up, and we're sitting with the charge of things and resolving them inside ourselves before we bring it to each other. So when there's a 10 or 20% like meltdown, the trust and safety that's in the bank account already, it can easily take it, and um, rupture repair is so much quicker as well. Um, and then you're laughing about it one day, in a short time after it occurs, as opposed to licking wounds and sort of glaring at the other from the side of your eye in the corner, sort of thing, which I've been there comprehensively.
Steve, uh, what I was thinking about while you explaining that is women really like the message of safety and trust. I mean, they when they hear that, especially two guys talking like that, that this is the foundation of a relationship, they just go, how do you get a guy to value that? And but in my perspective, and I think you feel this too, it's a reciprocal thing. I mean, I've been in relationships where I didn't feel safety and trust. And I'm wondering if you think that it's kind of a typical macho man thing to just like, I don't need any of that, I'm whatever. But what I'm getting at is that men react maybe to a woman who's talking about what her issue is or her problem, and she just wants to feel the safety and trust. The problem is that the man, because he doesn't value that he needs that, his reaction is more volatile sometimes and more insulting. And I've talked to a lot of women in the last several years, and I've heard this repeated over and over. They want to open up to the guy about their feelings, and then he's annoyed, and then it just kills the safety and trust. So I would like to hear you kind of give a pep talk to either men or women, that women need to establish a willingness and a desire to do safety and trust too. Do you agree?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a certain element here of two things. Wanting to be the ideal. We all want to move through our dysfunctions and the ways we're showing up that take our energy and wreck our relationships, or keep us isolated, and have we want to move beyond our negative thinking about ourselves and those sorts of stories. And also, I think there's a great realization that the way through all of that is acceptance and not resistance, because the resistance extends the journey of being able to come into a new season, to come into a different way of being, to transform. And I think just holding a space that the way you are is okay, and the way that you're showing up, it's easy, and it's taught more popularly to give yourself a hard time about things. The thing about giving ourselves a hard time is that it just doesn't deliver what it promises. Promises that things are going to get safer if you keep doing this. People are going to love you. People are going to be warmer. You're going to have more connection, more community, and your joy and happiness will increase if you just quietly bash yourself about these things. And it's not the case, and it's an adaptive mechanism from childhood. It's this kind of our observing the behavior of our heroes, and when they're grumpy, we kind of look for, what was the last way I behaved? Okay, yep, that got that response last time too. So there's kind of like a little bit of a, this kind of thing. So I think, again, a point of adulthood and maturity. Gosh, I don't that I don't feel like an authority on, but being an adult. But look, I'm having a solid crack at it. A point of maturity, a little bit like learning emotional regulation and emotional maturity, and taking responsibility for how we show up, is just learning to love those parts that have habitually for so long just been told they're not okay. And then there's a lightness in how we travel from there. And again, the that kind of that kind of negative self-regulation, if you like, is a function of the ego. And I don't use ego in a dirty word. What I'm saying is that there are there's the ego, and then there are unconscious ego functions, which when they're operating, they take up a lot of space inside of us. And that's where it can feel like, oh, well, that's just the way I am. I can't help behaving like that. Um, like change is hard for me, and there can be a fusion with some of these unconscious pieces. So I just have found that, yeah, acceptance and sending a loving energy towards these parts of us is a great disruptor to create the space to choose, be able to have a bit more choice. And it's about internal choice.
So I would like to hear from you personally the kinds of things that you integrated um, to prepare for that kind of relationship where you weren't going to be reactive, where you were going to be present, where you were going to be accepting. Like you mentioned a few things. You said fire breathing, but what, Steve, did you personally find that was helpful that you did to keep yourself calm when you're in one of these situations with your woman?
Yeah. Well, yeah, she's been a great mirror for me and a great teacher, as well as somebody who actually is in, yeah, good mastery of this. Actually, out of all the people I've met, I think she holds herself the best in this. And so she's both shared information with me and also modeled it, which is a great inspiration and influence for me. And I think, yeah, there's a pivotal moment that occurred when I brought something to her that was weighing on me. And I said, you know, I don't I don't know if there's I don't know if I've got an attraction to you in a certain way. And she said to me, Steve, when something comes up and it's a worry, it's a burden, it's a big feeling. It's possible for you to sit with that and the charge of it, and to be with that and resolve it in yourself first. And then, if by all means, if once the charge is dissipated on it, there is something to bring that will um, benefit our relationship, then by all means do so. But if there is a fear of sitting with the charge of it and the big feelings, and you bring it to me like this, well, it has this here. I can't sit. I'm having like trouble sitting with this. I don't like this big feeling. I'm going to put it on you, and can you help me with it? And that is like, as you can probably tell, it's a bit of a polarity killer. And
That's an attraction killer. Yeah.
it is, yeah. It's not going to increase chemistry, yeah, and attraction. So what and she shared with me, she's like, when you do that and you say this to me, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I just feel shit about that. And here I was thinking, and this is where I think the evolution is that here I was thinking, I'm being a sensitive new age guy, sharing my feelings. And I think there's a nuance in this, right? And I think there's a progression in this journey necessary, which is, yes, for men, it can be a gateway that they go through where just being able to name the feelings as they come up is a revelation, is a progression, is an evolution. And and then from there is a self-containment that's necessary. And this is a mature masculine, I think, which is to to notice the emotion, to notice the feeling, and to take stock of the charge with it, to be with it, resolve it, understand it. This is a piece, this is around that self responsibility of emotion and what comes up. And then I understand that I have a responsibility to my partner to not harm myself and to show up as the best person I can, firstly for me, importantly. But what spurs that on and what inspires me and excites me is I want to show up as the best me then for us and for her. And this is the ingredients of an inspired relationship. And this, I think, is the housing frame that gets built on the foundation of, well, we're doing all this beautiful work to build trust and safety with each other. We're applying generous amounts of love into the field between us because we're so appreciative of that trust and safety. And oftentimes, and ironically, because we've had experiences plenty of not having trust and safety in relationship. And so there's this kind of gratitude, I think, that we have these understandings where um, our need for um, nourishment and our need for loving connection and bonded behavior is really being met. And when that foundation is strong, then yeah, that's where these more mature things can develop. But if that's not there at all, like no foundation, then yeah, it's just difficult thing to stick. Now, I did, when I acknowledged before that I went a bit off track when you were speaking, I did remember, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the responsibility on both people in the relationship for this stuff that we're talking about. And yeah, I absolutely think that it is necessary for it. Like it just can't be that one person goes, no, that doesn't apply to me. You know, I'm an emotional person, and that's just me. If it's being voiced into the field that it is impacting trust and safety. Um, but also, I think as a man, I feel like it's my responsibility as well in that protector energy that activates in me, that if she is speaking negatively about herself, either directly or indirectly, that I actually come in and like call that critical voice out and actually be an advocate and a protector for her, and to say, look, I won't actually stand for you speaking uh, like about yourself like that, or if it's not just a vent, to actually and this is a developed skill as well, to actually have that boundaried ability in real time, um, which for me came from realizing it afterwards and then just shortening that gap to bring it into closer to the moment. But um, yeah, realizing that my responsibility can extend to somebody else maybe having a hard time with her emotions and the bigness of it as well. Um, but I think if both people are able to get on the same page of, I'm going to take responsibility for sitting with the charge of big feelings when they come up, And then if there's something to bring to you, I will, once I've resolved it inside myself. Then that sets a level of like ability to relax, and that an attack's not just going to launch from around the corner or something like that, which can be a bit tough if somebody is triggered like that and then just externalizes it straight away. That things that if that same issue is brought of, hey babe, can I have a chat with you about something? Is pretty funny what I noticed the other day or something like that. It's like, oh yeah, okay, and there's rather than this kind of like this jolt to the nervous system, which has its own and like complementary triggering and things like that. So I think that's the benefit of being able to sit with big feelings and be with the charge and resolve charge in the self, is that we're in choice around how we bring these things up. And there's a mutual respect that comes with that. And then, as I said, when that is unable to be maintained, because there's always going to be an uncovering and an unearthing of deeper and deeper stuff, because trust and safety wants to bring that stuff to the surface so that it can be cleared and detoxed out of the spirit and the emotional bodies. Then there's just way more capacity.
That's a great answer. And I want to make another comment and have you uh, tell me what your thoughts on. I did a video, I guess a year ago. It was about, and it came out of conversations that you and I were having through voice messages. Remember, a couple of years we did that. We didn't even talk. We were communicating that way. And I did a video called Bonding Behaviors. And one of the points I made in that is that when a man becomes needy towards his woman, I recommended that once you recognize that needy behavior, because usually the woman's going to have to she goes from lover mode to mommy mode. And when a woman goes to mommy mode, that there's no attraction. And that happens when a man is in his weakness or his reactivity, and she's got to hold him up, or you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I suggested that a man go to the wilderness, like the way indigenous people always used to do. They would do vision quests, or they would go into nature, and they would do, whether fasting or just go into solitude and consciously fill themselves with the angels of the terrestrial forces, which will work, because you can go and speak all your pain to the earthly mother instead of to your woman, And when you're filled up from that, you go back to your woman, and you've got so much of this divine masculine filled up energy that it just spills onto her. And I have proven for myself this works, but we're not taught very much in our modern society to and going back to your, sitting with big feelings. For me, that's how I would go sit with big feelings, is to just go out into nature and do it. So I just want to know if you have any experience with that, or you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. Yeah, what comes up for me, I think, is that mature masculinity doesn't necessarily need to be macho, and that it's possible for mature masculinity to exist like calmly, to not have bravado, and those things are inclusive as well. But just addressing some stereotypes, I guess, and yeah, a coach that I've worked with, he actually has a wilderness challenge, if you like, or initiation that he runs for men, where they go out into wild nature, and it's like a survival challenge to mimic claiming those parts of the self that are that may struggle to be initiated in our Western society, in our white Western societies, and that it's designed to be to use the same principles of go out into the wild, and you might have to fight a wild animal. You would need to, get your own water, get your own food, build your shelter. And it's through the observer in man watching this, taking the action necessary in order to ensure a survival, activates something in him, claims parts back in himself and activates parts in himself that shows him, if he's able to provide shelter for himself, that he is able to do it for other people. And I don't think there's any situation where going into nature in order to recalibrate our frequency is not going to benefit. And if there is stress, if a man's having trouble finding his peace, if he's having trouble coming back to his sense of self because he blurs it into somebody else, which can be this mother-son type dynamic. Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing more attractive and polarizing to a woman when a man is seated confidently in his essence of who he is, and she is not feeling that like subtle kind of underneath neediness filling up the space between them. When he is self-contained and in his knowing, knows himself, knows his path, knows his purpose, knows his roles and responsibilities, and does them, and his action is action based, and lets his actions do the talking. It's a really great foundation and place to be for that sovereignty you're talking about.
I really appreciate that answer, Steve. So before we wrap it up, what I would like to ask you about, I want people to know about your Compassion Keys work. You're very talented at that. And I've had, I think, maybe 3 sessions. So could you talk a little bit about, any guys or even women who are struggling with this, wanting to build safety and trust, and they see issues of reactivity within themselves, how your counseling sessions work?
Yeah.
And you are open to that, and Steve could actually use some financial help right now because he's going through some building projects, and he's I just want to give everybody the encouragement to seek him out. He's very good at what he does. So go ahead and talk about how that could benefit someone who's struggling like that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. And yeah, I'm definitely receiving and open available for clients at the moment. The work that I do, just recently I've been really sitting with this word, trauma release and trauma release therapist. And what has been feeling more appropriate is stuck emotion support. And the work that I do with people, oftentimes what is hurt or wounded from the past, or that's causing overwhelm, that is just too much to take, is pushed out into the subconscious so that it's out of immediate everyday view, so that people are able to just get on with life, because that's what gets modeled to us is, just get on with it, just get over it. And so we do. And just like the body tucks away toxins when they're ingested, and when there's a fast or a cleanse done that signals that it's appropriate and safe to actually clear that out through the body. The emotional body works very similarly. So it'll tuck stuff away as pockets in the body, and all of that discomfort is then stayed away from by the sense of self being in the head a lot. For men, they tend to have more comfort with that because they can be head dominant, and for women, it's more challenging because their body is their home base, and so this can result in a disconnection, and that that serves the purpose of giving us the earth experience, or a human experience on this life, in this life. And so I'm not judging it. What I have noticed is that these coping mechanisms or way of being do have an expiry date, or they have a self-destruct mechanism where the bigger parts of us, you might call it your higher self, the parts of us that are connected with everything, that we start to get signaled that it's too painful and uncomfortable and undesirable to continue going through life with these coping mechanisms and strategic adaptive behaviors, and that there's a desire to want to be living more from our essence and who we really are and our authentic selves. And that's where you hear people talk about doing the work with yourself, and journaling and any number of things. You can go to retreats, you can do a lot of stuff like this, seeing a counselor. And the service that I offer is there is a certain amount of progress that a person's going to be able to make by themselves with being introspective about this stuff. And then there will be places that are hidden, often for good reason and self-protection, that are feeling unsafe to actually go to by oneself. And there are such habituated pathways to avoid these places that that can be difficult to reach. And so if somebody's feeling uncomfortable with what's inside them, that they could do with some safe and helpful support, somebody that will guide the process so that it doesn't feel so scary and overwhelming, then what I offer through guiding somebody's own self-directed compassion, where they direct their own compassion at themselves, has a really powerful and potent ability to clear these things, because the direction of or the habituated habit of trying to avoid these things or tell them off or avoid them or not acknowledge them is a safe space is created to do the opposite, which is, let's acknowledge the experience of these parts and extend compassion to their experience. And it has a really powerful way of, a little bit like when we make the commitment to sit with the big feeling and the charge of it and just observe it and be there with it in a loving way, in a present way. It has a way of like kind of dissolving and dissipating and passing through. It's a similar sort of thing for big built up hurt and stored wounds and things like that, they have a way to dissolve as well. And when they're not being resisted and continuing on and continuing to take energy and be a burden and cause misery and suffering, then a freedom and a space is created internally. And I'm big about this internal space, because what it does is, when the what we're coveting and protecting no longer is there and doesn't need the energy that it takes to protect it, then the space that's created from there, and it's a bewildering experience when this happens, that the stimuli from the outside that would normally trigger a person and they respond in a way, whether they like the way they're behaving or not, is no longer connecting inside. It's like, oh, all of a sudden I've got this choice about how I want to respond to my partner, how I want to respond to my boss, how I think about my relationships and my friendships, how I think about my desire to want to be here on this planet anymore, and things like this, and the feelings of overwhelm. Uh, there is the ability to respond differently, and that this is the pathway towards expressing the sovereignty of who we really are in the world, as opposed to letting the world see our triggered responses and our coping mechanism patterns that have been strategic adaptations to try to generate safety. And when these inner conflicts and tensions are sat with and acknowledged, and they are cleared and dissolved, then the world is not as much of a scary place, because when that stimuli comes in, we're not anxious about the big feelings that we're going to be made to sit with that we don't know what to do with anymore. And so what a lot of clients experience is a feeling of freedom, and that they can step more excitedly into life because they're not feeling bound and bonded to these fear-based stories anymore. And yeah, and that's what lights me up. That's what I'm passionate about, so holding a space for people, because again, it's one of these more advanced emotional maturity things that nobody shows us how to wield our own compassion towards ourselves. And when we just get stuck in so many habitual pathways of kind of like telling ourselves off and chastising ourselves as a way to try to generate a successful life, they're just too contrary to each other, and people just find themselves down and out, and down on life. And it doesn't have to be that way. And I think as consciousness is increasing on this planet now, these types of liberation opportunities are available to us, and we have this more advanced understanding coming about. So
I
that's
think
what I
that's
offer.
fantastic. And one of the things that you have said that runs through my mind a lot is, a relationship is the best path for finding all those hidden pains. They're going to come up through those things. You can't hide your authenticity. And having these tools that you've suggested tonight, and especially if someone really needs the help, Compassion Keys is wonderful. If you remember, the last time I did it was in the spring, and I was in Gulf Shores, Mississippi, or Alabama. I mean, Gulf Shores, Alabama, and I was doing ancestral work, and I cleared a lot of ancestral stuff and those patterns through going through the process with you. Well, anyway, this has been a wonderful podcast talk, and I appreciate your time. And if you got any other final comments, and we'll just say goodbye.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to speak to that point that you mentioned there. Thank you for saying. And I think what it brought up for me is, in a relationship, I think it's a real turn on when each person seeks, when they realize that an activation or an upgrade is necessary. I think it's a real turn on when a person identifies it and says, yeah, babe, I got it. They go and get the support that they need, rather than making the partner the counselor. And it's through their lived example that their partner sees the change. And again, the trust and safety that generates, which is, I know you've got it when something needs to be addressed, and it doesn't hang around longer than it needs to. And it tells your partner that you're invested in the relationship, you're invested in each other's growth and in each other's fulfillment. And yeah, there's something special about that. And also, and that's what these sessions can offer is if somebody is in inner turmoil and they're trying to keep it private, but it's just the frequency and that suffering alone is still going to be noticeable and felt by the partner. And also the other thing as well that came up when you mentioned that is that some of these challenges can be coming from places that aren't really consciously knowable. For example, some past life issues can bleed into this life. And the thing that I love about the Compassion Keys modality is that it's designed to support any type of tension. It doesn't specifically just need to be childhood trauma events, but it's very effective at that. It can be something that there's an inkling that there might be a past life thing going on, or this is a repetitive pattern that's disturbing me and I don't know where it's coming from, or um, I am overwhelmed with my work. Like that's not a childhood thing, but you know, and I'm seeking to get some clarity and to clear some of this big charge that's making me feel grumpy and closed off and things like that. So another beautiful thing that comes in as well with these sessions and the intuitive aspect to it is the support that I notice with people that I work with of their ancestors, because many times people are coming in not really linking it together, but oftentimes they're actually personally taking on a family lineage issue that's been passed on through the generations, waiting for the buck to stop with someone in them taking responsibility for it. And I think this in the early days can be a deterrent to taking emotional responsibility, because it's like far out. It feels like we've got like a tenfold generational abdication of taking responsibility for something. And it's like, oh, the overwhelm of that. And now I've got to clear it. But the beautiful thing is, as you know, Leo, like being in a human body is a very powerful opportunity. The way that we're able to use our will and what we put it towards, we've got an enormous amount of God power to be and express and have whatever experience that we want. And it's absolutely possible to clear anything that is causing any type of tension that is inhibiting anybody's ability to live a free life from their soul essence, and to experience inner fulfillment and contentment. And yeah, that's what I offer. I'm on socials, so I'm on Instagram as steve.heart, as in the heart in the chest, dot
We'll put it up right
liberation.
here.
Yeah, so we'll put it in the notes or something like that. And I've also got a link tree on that Instagram, which leads through to the ability to have a free 15-minute information call with me. So I know for a lot of people that getting transparency around how a session unfolds and what they can expect and the particular details is important. And so I offer that, and it also gives me an opportunity to understand. Yeah, what somebody wants to work through as well. So yeah, that's me. Thanks so much for the opportunity, Leo. I love our chats.
Thank you for coming on tonight, and best of luck in your project. And we'll meet up again
Yeah,
soon, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely.
thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. All the best.